Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with two doctors, and we're going to begin with Dr. Rolf Gunnar, who died recently at the age of 91, one of the great cardiologists in the country. He was a student of my father. He was the head of medicine at Cook County for a while in the late 60s, early 70s, and he taught generations of cardiologists at Loyola University, the top cardiology center in Chicago. Dr. Gunnar went to Northwestern University as a member of the V-12 Navy College training program designed to produce young officers during World War II. He got a number of degrees, including his MD after the war. His medical residency at Cook County paused while he served as a U.S. Army and Battalion surgeon in the 2nd Infantry Division. He earned battle stars at Bloody Ridge, Heartbreak Ridge, and the Iron Triangle in Korea. Upon learning that a seriously wounded American soldier was lying exposed to enemy fire, he moved through intense artillery fire to render medical aid, evacuated the man to the Battalion Aid Station, and was awarded the Bronze Star with V device for valor. Returning to Cook County Hospital, he completed his residency, and after going into private practice with his father for a while, went on to study a fellowship in cardiology at Harvard Medical School. In a distinguished academic career, he trained many well-known cardiologists and internists. He was a distinguished academician, and his research interests included acute myocardial infarction and circulatory shock at a time when the discipline of cardiology was relatively new. He and his co-authors published more than 400 scientific papers and abstracts, and he co-authored a published book on shock and myocardial infarction. He first developed his clinical skills at a time before the technology we take for granted today, and his legions of students were often amazed by his ability to predict what advanced cardiac testing would show. Reputedly, he never lost the Stump the Star clinical challenge of analyzing a new case at the weekly Loyola Medical School Residents and Fellows Conference. After a lifetime of service and commitment to healthcare for all, he retired and became the chair of the board of directors for the Brave Hearts Therapeutic Riding and Educational Center, a charity he co-founded with his second wife, dedicated to serving children with disabilities, veterans, and their families. His legacy of skill, service, compassion, education, and care lives on today. I met him a number of times, and I can tell you he was a very great man. Our second physician is Dr. Gary Wadler, who died recently at the age of 78. Gary Wadler was from Brooklyn, and he was an internist with special expertise in exercise science and sports medicine. He was quite possibly the top expert in the country on sports doping, and he received the International Olympic Committee's President's Prize for his groundbreaking 1989 book, Drugs and the Athlete. He also served as the chairman of the Prohibited List Committee after the World Anti-Doping Agency was founded in 1999. Dr. Wadler's influence on the effort for clean sports has been enormous. He has been an instrumental leader in the early effort to establish independent anti-doping organizations separate from sport, which is now recognized as the gold standard model, said Travis Tygart, U.S. anti-doping CEO. He has long been a pioneer in this regard. Dr. Wadler was also the chairman and founder of the Taylor Hooten Foundation, which was founded after a high school athlete, Taylor Hooten, died as a result of taking performance-enhancing drugs. His father came and testified before Congress, and he and Dr. Wadler created the foundation, which is aimed at preventing high school athletes from getting involved with performance-enhancing drugs. Here, Dr. Wadler talks about the Hooten Foundation.
Well, one of the things that the Hooten Foundation, which I chair, has done is to really champion drug testing in schools. We've had it implemented in the state of Texas. But the word drug testing can be misleading because when we think drug testing in elite athletes, we think of sanctions. It may not be the reason you do it in high school. It may be part of an educational program, a deterrence program, a program to find kids who have problems, a program to give us a sense of the epidemiology in a particular community, an opportunity to refer kids to health facilities and doctors to take care of this. But there's two visceral reactions. One, they think immediately of professional sports, and two is the cost. And they say, well, we're cutting out all our extracurricular activities because we don't have in our budgets to do this. Communities feel this way. And that's an issue to be dealt with. But if you put the program together properly, you don't have to do large volumes. It has to be well constructed and targeted, and you probably keep it at a reasonable budget. So I do think it's not the answer, but I think it's part of the equation, along with education For example, we don't have a certification process for coaches in this country. Any dad or mom will go out and the coach. And some of them really don't have what they need to have to do that job properly. It may result in behaviors which are unfortunate. So, do I think testing should be done in the high schools? Yes, but in the context of a well thought out, articulated approach.
Here he talks about performance-enhancing drugs in professional sports.
Part of the argument comes back at me, and I guess I have sort of been one of the more outspoken individuals, is there are more people watching baseball than ever before. It doesn't make it right. Just remember Don Hooten's son Taylor. When we appeared in Congress, there were 3 families who lost kids to anabolic steroids. I often say when it comes to the Player Association who looks out for the good welfare of their players, they should not only be looking out for the financial good and welfare of their players, but the health, good and welfare of their players. The consequences of these drugs are not inconsequential. Just look what happened to professional wrestling and the number of premature deaths, which we think can't prove, but pretty comparable, related to the abuse of anabolic steroids and human growth hormone. What's it going to take? I don't know. I mean, many of us have laid out the elements. It's not like they have to invent the program. It exists. They just have to read it and implement it, or get a third party to implement it. Changing the nuanced changes within their program is not going to change anything. But that's what they're at. That's where they're at. So I don't know the answer. I don't know if they ever will until such time as public opinion puts enough pressure on them. And right now, public opinion is intrigued. Does this record count? Doesn't it count? Did this guy take it or didn't he take it? Are these home runs worthy of being in the Hall of Fame or not being in the Hall of Fame? All those kind of things. People seem to be more interested in those debates as I go around than, what's the consequences of all of this? I got into this as a physician. Watched what's happened to people. It's quite distressing.
Well, we're going to continue in the sports vein with Don Ohlmeyer, who died recently at the age of 72. He was an influential figure in television, first at ABC, where he produced Monday Night Football under Roone Arledge, and then he moved to NBC and he created must-see TV with shows like Friends and Seinfeld. He was a local boy. He was born in Louisiana, but he moved up here to Glenview, Illinois, not too far from where we're broadcasting. Went to Glenbrook North High School, played baseball with Doug Rader of the Houston Astros, went to Notre Dame, and from there got into television. Here he talks about his early days at ABC Sports and the wide world of sports.
From the first day I was there, it was impressed upon me. At the core of wide world of sports and at the core of everything we do at ABC Sports is storytelling. It's about drama. It's about finding what is the dramatic moment in the story. It's about not just covering an event, but telling a story. It's about understanding that if you're covering a great event, you still need to tell a story, but what you need to do is tell a story and get out of the way. If you're covering a bad event, which is more likely than covering a great event, you need to tell a story, and the worse the event gets, the more interesting you have to make the story. And I think that at its core was what Wide World's about.
Here he talks about the most important story that he was ever responsible for, Jim McKay announcing the massacre of the Israeli athletes during the 1972 Munich Olympics.
One of the things that I always admired Roone for was during that incident, he kept reminding all of us to be very careful about what we were broadcasting, what we were saying, what we were showing, because one of the athletes was a wrestler named David Berger, was an American, but he was wrestling for the Israeli team. And his parents were sitting in Cleveland, Ohio. And their only connection to what was going on was what they were seeing from us. And I think that's where you saw Jim McKay at his absolute most incredible, because he knew for 2 hours before we announced it that they were dead. But we could not say they were dead until the German government officially said it, because while we knew 99.9%, David Berger's parents were relying on us to be correct. When I think of how quick the news media is today to pull the trigger, regardless of whether they're right or wrong, and I think of the restraint that Roone insisted upon, and the poetic and beautiful way that Jim McKay carried it off, it's quite a contrast to me. It's indicative of how the level of journalism on television in America has dissipated just in 30 years.
We're going to move on now to Frank Vincent, who died recently at the age of 78, and he specialized in portraying mobsters on the screen. Here's B&O on the death of Frank Vincent.
Actor Frank Vincent, who is best remembered for his prominent roles in the HBO series The Sopranos and films such as Goodfellas and Raging Bull, has died. He was 78 years old. Vincent's acting career spanned more than 4 decades, during which he often appeared in mafia movies. His most memorable role includes Phil Leotardo in The Sopranos and Billy Batts in Goodfellas.
You gotta play his famous scene from Goodfellas where he's Billy Batts coming out of prison and tells Joe Pesci to get his shine box.
Tommy, all dressed up, all grown up and doing the town. Look at this. Tommy.
I forgot you was having a party with his mom.
Oh, come here.
Let me go say hello. Hey, Billy, how are you?
Tommy, get over here. I haven't seen you in 6 years.
How you doing, Billy?
Jesus Christ almighty. Terrific. Watch this suit. Watch this suit, you little... Hey, I know you all my life.
All right, good.
You're getting too big on me
Just
now.
don't go busting my balls, Billy, okay?
Hey, Tommy, if I was going to break your balls, I'd tell you to go home and get your shine box. Oh, this kid was great. I used to call him Spit Shine Tommy. I swear to God. Oh, he'd make your shoes look like mirrors. He was terrific. He was the best. And he made a lot of money, too. Salud, Tommy.
No more shines, Billy.
What?
I said no more shines. Maybe you didn't hear about it. You've been away a long time. They didn't go up there and tell you. I don't shine shoes anymore.
Relax, will you? For crying out, what's getting to you? I'm breaking your balls a little bit, that's all. I'm only kidding with you.
Sometimes you don't sound like you're kidding. You know, there's a lot of people around.
I mean, I'm only kidding with you. We're having a party. I mean, I just came home. I haven't seen you in a long time, and I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend you.
I'm sorry. It's okay. No problem.
Okay, salud. Now go home and get your shine box.
You!
Yeah. Come on.
You big tough guy. Keep him here.
Well, that leads to his death, and a little later on in the movie, it leads to Joe Pesci's death, too. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. We're going to close today with Sir Peter Hall, who died recently at the age of 86. He was the British director who founded the Royal Shakespeare Company. Here's Matthew Bannister from the BBC 4 Last Word on Peter Hall.
Sir Peter Hall was one of the titans of post-war British theatre. He founded the Royal Shakespeare Company and led the National Theatre. He directed acclaimed productions of both contemporary and classical works, featuring all the leading actors of his generation.
He was earmarked, as it were, by the bigwigs at Stratford-on-Avon in what was then called the Memorial Theatre, Glenn Byamshaw and Anthony Quayle, and invited to direct there. On his way, he directed Leslie Caron and married her, the great film star, his first of his 4 wives, and then he was at Stratford in the last great season before he created the Royal Shakespeare Company, where Olivier, Charles Laughton, Peggy Ashcroft, and there was a kind of elision between those days and then him founding the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1960 with Ian Home in that company and, of course, Peggy Ashcroft.
To be a queen in bondage is more vile than is a slave in base civility. For princes should be free.
And so shall you.
That was Peggy Ashcroft and Sir Laurence Olivier. One of Sir Peter Hall's most memorable productions at the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1960 was A Midsummer Night's Dream starring Charles Laughton. Here he talks a little bit about Charles Laughton as an actor.
And I will sing. The dice are here, I'm not afraid.
And it always surprised me the difference between his screen performances, which very much pull the camera towards him, and his stage performances, which were like almost lectures. And that's not derogatory, but lectures of what you were meant to think about them. That was, I think, very modern. He wasn't sentimental as an actor. He wasn't romantic. He didn't ask for sympathy. In fact, he was one of the first great actors I worked with who didn't wish to be loved by the audience. Who I think actually believed that if he showed the warts of a character and its follies and its weaknesses, that in itself was lovable. At that time, I think there was still a tradition that I mustn't do anything unsympathetic for my public. I never felt that about Charles. I think he was a very, very, very great actor who was mistimed. I think either earlier or later, he would have reached the full gamut. I mean, he would have been a great film personality and a great classical actor, but he should have been both.
In closing tonight, as a final tribute to Sir Peter Hall, we're going to play a little bit of A Midsummer Night's Dream by Felix Mendelssohn.